Hello, everyone. I'm here to announce our keynote speaker of our showcase. Dr. Shawn DuBravac helps leaders understand how the world is changing and how we can prepare our organizations for the future. Named one of the top futurist speakers to have at your conference, DuBravac is a trendcaster, PhD economist, and New York Times best-selling author. He is on a mission to empower leaders and their organizations to improve their decision-making by understanding the changing technological and societal landscape and identifying the opportunities that lie ahead. A former chief strategy officer at Apple said DuBravac works at the epicenter of technology and society. When he talks, I listen, and I am excited to hear what he has to say to us now. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shawn DuBravac.
All right. Thank you, Quinn. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Quinn. It is great to be here with you. Hopefully everybody has eaten an excessive amount this weekend. It's wonderful to be in one of the great food capitals of the world. So today we're going to talk about the future of restaurants. And before we go forward, before we look into the future, what I want to do is zoom back. And I want to step all the way back to the late 1800s when we were harvesting ice from frozen rivers. And if you lived in a northern state, is there anybody here who is originally from a northern state, Michigan, Minnesota? If you were from one of these states in the late 1800s, this was a massive industry. Over 100,000 Americans involved in this trade, over 25,000 horses involved in ice harvesting. This is as sophisticated as it sounds. We waited for rivers and lakes to freeze over. We would then cut big blocks of ice. We would store it in big ice houses along those rivers and lakes, and then we would ship that ice into the urban center in the summertime as demand would pick up. But it wasn't just moving ice to Chicago or New York. Obviously, we moved ice down to New Orleans. We moved ice to the Caribbean. We were exporting ice as far as India in the late 1800s. So this was big industry back in the late 1800s. And you can still find the remnants of these old ice houses on the outskirts of lakes and rivers. You know, if you travel outside of New York City up at the Hudson River, you'll see old ice houses. They've all now been converted to microbreweries or Airbnbs or other, wedding venues, things like that. Why do I start here? I start here because this is an industry that saw not just one, but two massive technological shifts. The first happened in the early 1900s when we learned to manufacture ice. So no longer did we have to wait for rivers and lakes to freeze over. We could just produce ice on demand anytime we wanted, and we would do this right in the heart of urban centers. So the industry moved from the outskirts right into the heart of our urban centers. We could deliver ice, anyone who wanted it, 24/7, 365 days a year. Turns out not the most sanitary of professions in the early 1900s. This is the Iceman that was delivering your ice in the early 1900s. They used to make ice boxes that you could actually load from the outside of your house, and I thought, well, why would you ever need to load the ice from the outside of the house? And then I saw this photo and I realized that's why you didn't want the Iceman in your house. So obviously, I'm sure none of us are having our ice delivered in the ways that we used to in the early 1900s, because the second technological transformation hit in the 1940s, and especially as we were coming back from World War II. As we came back from World War II, we learned how to manufacture ice right in the confines of our kitchen. So no longer did we have to have it delivered, but we could have it produced anytime we wanted. And the early refrigerators and freezers all touted how much ice they could produce, how many ice cubes could be stored, how many could be produced. And it wasn't the manufacturers who moved from the center of urban areas producing ice that became the ice refrigerator and freezer manufacturers. There's a whole new group of leaders, a whole new group of industries that rose to the top. It was companies like GE, Frigidaire, Norge, some of the brands we might recognize today. They were the businesses that rose to take over when the technology shifted. And so what I want you to see here is that here's an industry that saw not just one, but two technological shifts. And each time the technology changed, the leaders in that industry changed. It wasn't the incumbent businesses that just adopted the new technology and then continued to thrive. Each shift brought new leadership. I think that same thing plays out in every industry. I think that same shift will play out in the restaurant industry. With technological shifts, you see not the incumbents making the jump, but new entrants and new businesses that end up taking advantage of that technology in new and unique ways that end up really dominating the industry. I think one of the challenges that every business has, but certainly restaurants have, incumbents have, is the difficulty in making that jump and making that leap is that you have to be working across competing time horizons. You have to be focused not just on what's happening right now, what's due this week, this month, this quarter, this year, but you also have to be thinking about what are we going to do in 5 years to remain relevant? What are we going to do in 10 years to remain relevant? And you have to be building that business now. You don't have to do it all today, but you do have to be slowly, steadily putting in place what I call the rails of that business. So as restaurant operators working in the restaurant industry, it isn't just focusing on all the things we have to do in 2026, all the things we have to do in July or August. It's also thinking through what are we going to do in 3 years to remain relevant? What does our menu look like? What does our technology stack look like? What does our hiring practices look like? Those are the things you have to start thinking about today. You don't have to answer all those questions today, but you do have to start putting in the options in place. So here's a couple of ideas around what that looks like. When we think about competing on different time horizons, I'll offer you a couple of what I call rules to help navigate that, to have 1 foot in the present, but also 1 foot leaning into the future. I think first we need to move and shift our CapEx thinking to capabilities thinking. We need to move from thinking about just the infrastructure that we need, but also thinking about what are the capabilities that this brings. It isn't just, okay, this new technology is here, I'm going to swap it out, and I'm going to put this other technology in. It's thinking about what are the broad capabilities that are being produced as the technology starts to shift and as the technology starts to change. And then second, I start to identify the scarcities. Where are the scarcities in my marketplace? Maybe that's within a cuisine, maybe that's a geographic market. What are the scarcities that I'm competing for and that I'm competing against, and moving towards those scarcities? We know throughout time that value always accrues to where those scarcities show up. And so what are the scarcities in your particular industry or your particular market? Is it a menu item? Is it geographic proximity to something? Thinking through what those scarcities are and what they will be in 3 to 5 years will help you understand what's the strategy that you want to employ when you start to build the restaurant of the future. Let me walk through 3 or 4 ideas that I think are right now defining the future of the restaurant, some of the forces at play. The first is a broad shift from digitization to datification. If you step back to the late 1990s, we were living in a very analog world. It wasn't until 1998 that we sold the very first digital television. It wasn't until 2001 that we saw the original iPod. 2003, we get the first smartphone. So prior to this point, we're living in a very analog world. And then in quick succession, we began to replace all of those analog products with digital ones. And that transformation has really defined the last 25 years. We've moved from analog processes, analog systems, to digital ones. I think the next big transformation is upon us. And just like digitization defined the last 25 years, I think this move to datification is what will define the next 25 years. Yes, digitization will continue to move forward, but it's really this broad shift. So let me give you a feel for what I think that starts to look like and how that starts to impact restaurants as we move from digitization to datification. I'm going to jump again back to the 1980s when Pepsi was going around the country doing their blind taste challenges. How many of you remember Pepsi's blind taste challenges? How many, by show of hands, where are my Pepsi drinkers in this audience? We've got One of you, two of you, you two should meet. We've got two Pepsi drinkers here. You two could be friends. Coca-Cola drinkers here? Looks like most of you. Okay, so Pepsi was going around, as you know, they were doing these blind taste challenges in shopping centers and malls. And normally this is where I need to pause for the younger people in the audience and explain what a shopping center is for those who've never been to a mall. And so they would take a little cup of Pepsi, a little cup of Coca-Cola, and then they would reveal to the participant what they had chosen. And they found that over half of Americans were choosing Pepsi over Coke. They preferred that sweeter formula to Coca-Cola's formula. Now, what worried Coca-Cola at this time was not the commercials, but that they were doing the exact same market research, and they were finding the exact same thing. They were finding, yes, people are preferring Pepsi's sweeter soda to Coca-Cola's traditional formula. So Coca-Cola came up with a grand plan, a grand strategy to combat this. Does anybody know what that grand strategy was? New Coke. That's exactly right. They came up. This also shows you peak marketing in the 1980s. Like, this is a whole new bet the firm, bet the company decision. This wasn't just a soda that was going to sit next to the original Coke. They were getting rid of the original Coke, replacing it with this new formula. The whole firm is going to be bet on this one decision, and what are they going to call it? New Coke. Let's just call it New Coke. It's like peak marketing in the 1980s. What do we call this brand new thing? Let's just call it New Coke. Oh yeah, that's great. So they came out with New Coke, and as many of you know, there was massive uproar about New Coke. Thousands of letters were sent. People were calling in complaints. People were stockpiling Coca-Cola at that time. I bet not far from where we are, there is probably a barn somewhere in Louisiana. There's like a Trans Am parked right there, and then there's like 200 bottles of Coke that were stored in the 1980s when, when people were worried that this was going to be taken off the shelf. So in quick order, after Coca-Cola started to hear from all their customers, they kept the original formula on the shelf. They would eventually get rid of New Coke, but because this was going to get rid of, New Coke was replacing the original formula, they had to bring out the original formula with a new name. And so what did they call the original formula? Classic Coke, right? Again, this is like marketing in the 1980s. We're not going to make it overly sophisticated. So they came out, they brought back Classic Coke, got rid of New Coke eventually. What Coca-Cola missed was that, yes, people do prefer a sweeter soda in small amounts. When it's a small little cup, they might prefer that sweeter Pepsi flavor. But when we're drinking 24 ounces or 48 ounces or 128 ounces like we do, then maybe we don't want that sweeter soda all the time. And so they brought back the original formula. Let me fast forward in Coke's history. As we moved into the 1990s, Coke introduced a new machine. This is their freestyle machines. I'm sure all of you have had the chance at this point to try freestyle machines. And the beauty from a customer perspective is that it lets you mix and match any drink. You can pour whatever you want. You can create your own formulas. But this was really a supply chain technology. This was a technology designed to help restaurants understand what needed to be replenished. So a restaurant could go up to this machine at the end of the night and physically plug in a memory card and download the data. This was before the machines were connected to the internet. You could download the data. You could look at what had been consumed, and then you could know what needed to be replenished. So you could troubleshoot the machine after hours, as opposed to when we, and I'm sure all of us can remember this, you'd go up to a soda machine and it would not be functioning, right? It'd either be broken or the syrup, carbonation mix would be off, and that was always happening during the lunch rush or the dinner rush. So they created this to streamline that process for restaurants. Later on, they would connect the machines to the internet, again, just making it easier for the restaurants to access that data. But they realized quickly that they could also take a little look at what people were consuming. They could start to look at the tastes and preferences of consumers in real time. They did a competition where they pitted 5 different soda flavors against each other to see which soda flavors were the most popular. But the way you voted for your favorite wasn't by texting or calling or sending an email. The way you voted for your favorite was just by pouring the drink. Because Coca-Cola could see that data in real time, they could count how many times the drink had been poured. Every pour was a vote. Whoever got the most pours, whoever got the most votes, won a $10,000 prize. Coca-Cola would eventually take this data that was really a byproduct of the machines, what I call data exhaust from the machines, and used that data then to help make product introductions. The very first was Sprite Cherry. This was the very first new flavor for Sprite in over a decade. And they took that information that was coming off the machines, what people were consuming around the world, and started incorporating that into soda flavors. We got orange vanilla from the same data. We got Starlight. I have no idea what Starlight is. It's space flavored, whatever that means. But it's coming off of these machines. All of this data that we're just freely giving Coca-Cola every time we pour a drink, they're now taking and using it to drive product introductions, to look at the tastes and preferences of the global consumer. What's somebody drinking in Paris, Texas versus Paris, France? How do tastes and preferences differ between maybe Baton Rouge and New Orleans? Is there any difference? And then using that data to make product introductions. More recently, they introduced a new soda flavor called Y3000. This is designed to be the taste of soda in the year 3000, because we're all going to still be drinking soda in 3000 if you're Coca-Cola. And you'll note that this is what they call co-created with AI. They claim this is the first soda flavor co-created with AI. Now we know that the fuel of AI is data. Where's all of this data coming from that's driving these algorithms to come up with new soda flavors? I would bet it's coming off these freestyle machines, all the data that we're giving them freely, they're harvesting and then redeploying back into product introductions. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, says business logic will move from code that's written to code that's learned from data, creating a completely new generation of business process and productivity systems. So it's data that's going to start to drive the decision. So what does this look like for a restaurant in the future, and how does that data start to go? I would argue that there is a tremendous amount of data exhaust every day that is produced in a restaurant that today isn't being captured and being redeployed, but over time, over the next 10 or 20 years, as we move through this transformation from digitization to datification, will be redeployed. So a couple of examples. This is a company called Nuvu Labs, which will scan a tray and tell you what the all of the nutritional value of that food. It could tell you what the caloric intake is of that tray. It could tell you any other metrics that you might want from that tray, so you can get, with some amount of precision, what is on the plate that you're eating. We've already seen Lufthansa has a new program where they're scanning the food as it comes back to look at what waste was produced. Were there certain menu items that were eaten at a less degree than others? Were there certain items that weren't touched or weren't fully eaten? And then can they then make menu decisions based upon what comes back? So they're measuring not just what goes out, but also measuring what comes back. And this is that shift from digitization to datification, using that information then to feed it back into menu choice, other decisions. Obviously, when you're an airline, any of that food coming back, it shows up in weight, and so you've got additional fuel costs there, so they're trying to avoid that. I would imagine you're going to start to see tray trackers over time in lots of food service environments, lots of restaurants, and that data will show back up in the type of menus. And in real time, you can kind of see how tastes and preferences are starting to evolve. We're starting to see devices like this. This is from a French startup. It's called the Allergen Alert, where you can test. You can see it's not much bigger than your mobile phone, and you can test for allergies in the food that's being served. So rather than if you've got really difficult allergies, rather than just taking the restaurant's word for it, you could test the food there. If you're a restaurant, maybe you provide this, and they could test their own course before they consume it if they've got deadly allergies or other things like that. Maybe they've got gluten allergies, other things. So I think this type of technology gets woven into the fabric of that dining experience and that restaurant experience. It isn't just delivering the food anymore, it's also delivering other services around what that food looks like. Even the way we find out about restaurants is starting to change. Just in the last couple of weeks, Google introduced Ask Maps, which allows you to, within the mapping environment, find restaurant recommendations based upon any number of parameters. So this is using natural language. I might say, and in this particular example, they're saying, hey, I've got some friends who are going to meet me after work. We're looking for a cozy restaurant around 7 p.m. So it can go out and look at what restaurants are sit between 2 points that might be considered cozy, that have availability at 7 p.m. But also, it already knows all my preferences. In this example, she prefers vegan restaurants. She's saved some restaurants, and so it might then recommend some that she's already saved. All of this data layer is sitting inside of this, what was the digital shift, right? As we went from analog mobile phones to digital mobile phones, that's that first shift. We're now on to the second shift where that data layer starts to drive decisions. And it's driving decisions of which restaurant do we go to, what do we order inside of that restaurant. All of these decisions that we're making are being motivated by what's happening in and around the restaurant. Trend number 2, the move to agentic AI is upon us, and we're starting to see this explode everywhere. All of this really transpiring in just the last 6 months. Microsoft introduced their Copilot checkout, where right inside of the AI browser, if you're in Copilot, you can, from discovery to purchase, make a purchase decision. You saw Google at the same time introduce their universal commerce protocol, which allows you to discover a new product and make a purchase all without having to leave that AI interface. And we're going to start to move this into a multi-mold environment. You're going to start to see this show up not just in text, but being able to voice it, being able to use my glasses for these type of decisions. Just in the last couple of weeks, Google announced that they were going to move this towards hospitality, towards restaurants, and towards hotels. So you'll be able to order different items. You could order things through delivery services or perhaps directly from restaurants, just using natural language from discovery all the way to purchase. I think the way we interact with restaurants, the way we interact with information is starting to shift as well. One of the other things that Google recently introduced was their business agent, which allows you to interact with a brand right from the point of discovery. So in this particular example, they're showing their partnership with Lowe's. But rather than having to go to the Lowe's website, you're interacting with a digital agent that has access to all of the information on the Lowe's site. So imagine this for a restaurant where I search for a cuisine or I search for restaurants around my proximity, and then I could, rather than peruse their menu, I can actually have an interaction with the menu. I could ask, what are some of the ingredients? Where are the products coming from? Is it local seafood or not? I can start to have that natural language conversation with the restaurant brand right inside of the interface that I'm already interacting with. And so as restaurants, we have to ensure that our data layers are prepared for this agentic environment. We saw Papa John's in the last couple of weeks introduce their voice-enabled feature. And let me just show you kind of what this looks like, because I think if you see it in a live demo, then you can get a feel for where this starts to go. So I'm opening up the Papa John's app. They call it Lou.
I'll help you create your order, and we'll apply any available discounts before you check out to make sure you're getting a great deal.
Great. Hey, Lou, thanks. Hey, I'm in Louisiana right now. It's 2 o'clock. Everybody is looking really hungry. Could we have a bunch of pizzas sent here? I'm not sure how many to order. I think there's, maybe 75 people here. Probably give me a mix of different things that, that you would include. I bet there's some people that want just vegetarian options, so include some of those, and maybe a gluten-free option. Does that work?
I can definitely help with a group order for 75 people. I recommend 25 large pizzas to feed everyone. For a mix, I can suggest a variety, including
Okay, so
vegetarian.
I'm going to stop that before we end up with a lot of pizzas delivered here. But now imagine, all I was trying to do was solve a problem. But I start to tell Papa John's things about my situation that can start to feed their loyalty program in ways we never imagined. Imagine if I called and said, hey, Lou, I'm hosting a birthday party for my 3-year-old daughter, and I think I'm going to have maybe 20 adults here, 17 kids. I don't know how many pizzas to order. Can you help me with that? And so I'm starting to divulge information to the brand based upon me trying to solve the solution. And when you start to think about that data layer, are you prepared to engulf that amount of information, to understand the explosion that will exist with your loyalty programs? I think that's the big transformation that we're going to start to see. As we use natural language in our interactions with restaurants, we're going to start to hear things that we never imagined from our customers simply because they're trying to understand maybe things on the menu, they're trying to solve things, they're trying to figure out what to order. But we'll start to understand our customer at a much deeper level. And so that's the shift that's starting to happen now. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said that the IT department of every company is going to be the HR department of AI agents in the future. I actually think it's going to be more pronounced. I think it isn't just the IT department. I think every individual in the restaurant, every customer that comes into the restaurant, everyone that interacts with your brand is going to have AI agents doing things for them. Either finding things on the menu to choose from, choosing the actual restaurant for them based upon preferences. All of those things are going to move towards a data layer where it's going to be less, let me look at the menu and decide what I want, and it's let my agent recommend a couple of choices for me based upon what it knows about the restaurant and what it knows about me. And so right now it's going to use what's available to it, everything on your website, everything in your menu. It's going to use reviews on Google or Yelp or other places. So making sure that that's still accurate with what you're offering, I think is of utmost importance so that when these agents are making recommendations, they're making accurate recommendations. I think that the shift we have to make is to stop thinking about things in terms of keywords, which is the traditional way we thought about connecting with our customers, what Google keywords we wanted to use, and start to think about what are they actually asking? What are the prompts that they're going into these AI systems and with? What is it that they're actually telling me? And can I use that to expand my loyalty program to really understand my customer at a very deep level? Trend number 3 is a shift towards real media and towards synthetic media and the drive that synthetic media is going to have. So here's your quiz for the day. Which of these boys are real? And which of them are synthetically created, AI generated, computer generated? Any guesses on the real boys up there? 6, 3, 0. None of them. None of them are real. Okay. I'll tell you, there's one real boy up there. I heard 8. Okay, there's one real boy. Number 4, that's me when I was 8 years old. All the other ones are obviously, I just took that. You can see me like at J.C. Penney's or Olin Mills, I think, in front of the backdrop. And then from that real picture, number 4, I created the other one, simply just asked AI, what do you see, and then produced more from that. If you follow international politics at all, then you might recognize the former president of South Korea. Why I highlight former President Yoon is because when he was running for president, both he and the person he ran against created synthetic copies of themselves. It's the first time in history where we saw 2 presidential candidates both use synthetic media to help get out their message. And simply the way you do this is you can create a synthetic copy of yourself. You can then use any number of ways to then drive a specific message to your constituents. Now, they were always very transparent. They weren't trying to fool anybody. They always very clearly said that this is Yoon AI, but it allowed them to deliver specific messages to their customers.
Bob, I just wanted to thank you for dining with us.
I did the same thing.
It was great to see you and your wife, and we are looking forward to having you back with us soon. Bob, solo quería agradecerte por cenar
So
con
I don't
nosotros
speak
esta semana.
Spanish.
Fue un placer verte a ti y a tu esposa, y esperamos tenerlos de regreso con nosotros muy pronto.
Bob, 我只是想感谢您本
And I
周
definitely
光
don't
临
speak
并与我们
Chinese.
共进晚餐，很高兴见到您和您的夫人。我们也期待不久后再次欢迎您回来。
So you could imagine this could be a way for me to get out quick video messages to my constituents. Maybe I've got people who are always coming. I've got regulars, and I want to thank them for coming. They came in for a retirement party or maybe a graduation or anniversary. I could send them out quick video messages This way, using synthetic media, I could be very transparent about it, but allows me to get customized, personalized messages out there. Maybe there's other ways of using it from a marketing perspective. Or for those of you who are just tired of being on Zoom calls, this is technology from NVIDIA that makes it look like you're looking at the camera, even if you're not really looking at the camera. So this is very popular during March Madness, I think, and other FIFA, their games in the middle of the day. So let me kind of wrap this up with one final thought. And it's this idea that as the technology shifts and as the operating models start to change, the business models also have to change. And that's the next big shift. It isn't just, okay, again, I'm going to rip out my existing technology, I'm going to put in some new technology and move forward. You also need to recognize that your business model starts to shift. And those changes are often much larger than just the underlying technology shifts. Here's an example from Google of how they see the operating models start to change.
The Dutch cycle more than any other nation in the world, almost 900 kilometers per person. But that also means we have 350,000 bike-related injuries. Now imagine that we would make biking safer, smarter, and easier by applying self-driving technology to biking.
We taught our self-driving bike to figure out where it is, what's around it, what will happen next, and what it should do. We leaned on Google's expertise in self-driving cars, but we had to adapt the technology to work on a bike. We decided to add 2 additional features. First, you can request the bike to pick you up wherever you are, and we developed a comfort mode, adjusting the pedals to a perfect resting position.
I think the self-riding bike could really give a boost to the economy because people could also work on their bicycle. You work in your office, you work in your home, you work in your car. You could even work on your bike.
I have so much more time. My kids love it. They're just free. They can go anywhere they want, anytime they want. It's amazing.
At the Futurist Bond, we feel that this is the biggest invention since the invention of the bicycle itself.
At Google, we always put our users first. With the launch of this bike, we believe we do that again.
So you guessed it, not a real product, at least not yet. But this is a real product, obviously, from Google. Their Waymo self-driving vehicles, they've been doing this now. They're shooting to approach 4 million rides a month. They're right now at about 2 million rides a month, so they're halfway to their near-term goal. And I think this has really interesting implications for restaurants as well, because when we start to rethink the configuration of that vehicle, that interior of the vehicle could be any number of things. Maybe that self-driving car, maybe that self-driving car becomes the restaurant of the future, and it picks us up, and maybe we have, you know, the appetizers in the ride to the restaurant, and we get to the restaurant, and we have a very different experience, and then when we, you know, maybe we move somewhere else for dessert. Who knows what that starts to look like? But when we change how we move from point A to point B, it also starts to open up other questions. This is an example from Toyota as they rethink what self-driving technology looks like. And obviously, they've shown a healthcare example here where the woman does some initial diagnostics before she actually gets to the hospital or to the medical office to see her physician in person. It doesn't take away the in-person experience, but it fundamentally changes it. And it will have an impact on what the physical footprint of restaurants look like. Certainly it could change what parking lots are needed. All of those changes start to change the business model of the restaurant. Let me give you one other example. This is from John Deere. John Deere has what they call their See and Spray tractor. So the See and Spray tractor will drive down the field and it will spray the weeds, 120-foot boom on the back of that tractor, spraying the weeds. But you'll notice that it's been outfitted with cameras. So rather than spray the entire field, it just sprays the weeds. Last year, John Deere drove this tractor over 5 million acres. That's about the size of New Jersey. And it saved 31 million gallons in herbicides. Because rather than spray the entire fields, it's just spraying the weeds. And so now farmers are starting to make different choices. In some cases, they're using higher grade chemicals because they're not using as much. They're able to make other choices and other decisions. But the part I want you to see is that the technology enabled John Deere to change how they price the service. Rather than just sell the tractors to farmers, they price this technology on a per acre basis. Right now it's $5 an acre, but they only charge the farmers if they don't use the technology. So normally we're charged when we do use the technology, but because this is a savings technology, they're only charging them when they're not spraying the fields. John Deere's entire business model, 183-year-old tractor company, is fundamentally changed because the technology allowed them to change how they price. And I think that's where restaurants will start to shift as well. It isn't just like, okay, here are our costs, let's add some margin, here's our retail costs, here's how much this plate of food's gonna cost you, but we can start to rearrange how we actually price the products and services that we deliver to consumers. And technology, I think, is going to fundamentally change that. We've obviously seen an explosion of robots. Robots, I think we're in the early stage of this, and when we think about, again, this broad shift over 25 years, robots will have a push there as well. This is Neo from 1X, and here is Neo loading the dishwasher. This is a robot you can order today. It's $20,000. They say they'll ship by the end of the year. It takes Neo over 5 minutes to load the dishwasher. Not the most eloquent of robots, and so a lot of people are critical of this. I'll tell you, I have teenage sons, and I would be ecstatic if I could get them to load the dishwasher in 5 minutes. If I could get them to load the dishwasher without me asking 500 times or loading it at least that day, I would be ecstatic. So this isn't a technology today that's replacing humans, but it could sit next to humans. It could augment that experience. It kind of reminds me of Johnny Five a little bit.
Still lumpy.
But we're moving on to the next age of robots. And maybe, if not next year, in years ahead, you'll have a live chef and a robotic chef going head to head on this very stage, competing in all of the things that they can bring to market. And again, not that they're going to compete on the same product category or the same experience, but it's a product category that can sit next to them. Sweetgreens has their Infinite Kitchen, which has automated some of their supply lines inside of their restaurants. They now have it in about 18% of their restaurants are these computerized and robotic supply production lines, if you will. What they're seeing is it's cost savings, there's labor savings, there's also food savings because the portions are served in the regulated amount each time, and so they know exactly how much food is being delivered, and so they're seeing savings there. The other thing to recognize with all of this push, when you look at synthetic video and synthetic audio, and I know you have exhibitors here that are touting this type of technology, not only are we seeing higher upsales through AI when it comes to quick service restaurants, but we're also seeing higher net promoter scores. So the customers are saying they're having a better experience as well. A customer who can call your restaurant and get an answer, even if it's not a human delivered answer, but a quick answer to their question, to their inquiry, is a customer that feels happy. And so you see higher net promoter scores there. You also see lower turnover and lower burnout from the staff because they're not having to do all of the repetitive questions. So yes, it is part of your tech stack. Yes, it's an added cost. But when you have a situation where you're seeing higher upsell, lower burnout from your staff, and a higher customer net promoter score, that's like the perfect trifecta of what we're trying to achieve. Now, some of these things, like some of the robotic examples, feel far out. And it reminds me of when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone in 2007. This is the original article from the New York Times, the very first article from the New York Times that covered the introduction of the iPhone. And you'll notice here in the second paragraph, the creation of the iPhone priced at $499 or $599 will not be for everyone. Now, first of all, wouldn't we love to get an iPhone for just $5.99 or $4.99? Imagine that. And also this idea that, oh, you know, this technology, it's so new, it's so nascent, it's a great technology, but it's not for everyone. We kind of hear that repetitively around technology. I would imagine all of you have at least one smartphone, and probably some of you are carrying with you now 2 smartphones, only a few years after the point where the New York Times said, this technology is not for everyone. And that's where we are with some of the AI technologies. That's certainly where we are with physical AI and robotics. It feels like a niche technology that's not for everyone, and then slowly, before suddenly, quickly, it's upon us. I think as you think about these technologies, it can be overwhelming. It can feel like, oh, where do I even start? And I want to challenge you to think about what I call lower T transformations, small T transformations. Rather than some big technology transformation that is going to take years to implement and cost millions of dollars, think about what are the small things that I can do now? What are what I call small T transformations that you could implement that will push you in this direction, that will drive you into a datafied world and allow you to be ready to meet the future when it arrives. And the other thing I think about with a lot of these things is how do we automate very narrow, repetitive, clearly defined tasks and then redeploy humans into hospitality? As much as there are some labor savings, I don't think these are labor replacement technologies. This is about reallocating labor to other places, and the best place to reallocate that in restaurants is towards hospitality. So let me pause there just for a minute. I know that we've got a microphone, and I'm happy to take questions. I've got a QR code there. You can drop me your email, and I'm happy to send you in classic AI fashion. I've recorded this talk, so I'll give you the transcript, and I'll give you, some notes on it as well, if that's helpful to you. So feel free to drop your email. Quentin here has our microphone. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take some questions to you. And yeah.
I was wondering if you could address full service or fine dining restaurants and what you're seeing in that space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in some of the things that I've covered that will fit really well for fine dining, full service restaurants. I think being able to meet the customer where they're at is our ultimate objective, right? And so are we prepared to meet the customer at 2 a.m.? And if so, like how and with what information? And so I'm pretty bullish on things like synthetic media, having AI agents. I think we're still very new, it's very nascent, but having AI agents that can interact with our customers when they call, when they send emails, can do that in real time, regardless of what's going on. I think all of that can be helpful. So I think there's that dynamic, the customer-facing examples. I think ensuring that your data is widely available, and whether that's coming through other services, whether that's coming through your website, but more and more people are turning their decisions over to agents. Whether that's good or bad, I think remains to be seen. But we know that it's happening. And so when they're looking at where do I want to go for this anniversary, where do I want to go for this birthday party, being able to meet them where they're at. And Google is even looking at ways of making adaptive ads. So when somebody searches for, hey, I'm looking for a place to do a birthday party, you can have your ad say, this is a great place for birthday parties. And you didn't have to pre-specify that, but it's doing it in real time. That's something that they just announced about 8 weeks ago, and so they're starting to roll that out. And so we'll start to see ads become adaptive in that way. And so there's a customer-facing piece that I think every full-service restaurant, every quick-service restaurant can take advantage of. And then I think there is a back-of-house piece of it as well, where whether we're using AI to more quickly respond to reviews online and getting our information out there, because we know that's going to be feeding the engines. So whether somebody has a good example, and I think you need to think about what's the message that I want out in the world, and what's the message that I want AI to have access to. So whether it's a good review or a bad review, talk about your menu. talk about your experience, talk about other things that will be fuel for AI to drive recommendations for you. And so I think there's that piece. That obviously can be happening back of house, but as we streamline that, that should bring general managers more into the front of the house, allow them to interact with our customers and improve hospitality. So I think there's a lot of things that we can happen there. Let me stop there because I know we'll be competing soon with wine, and I have learned one thing in life, and that's never to compete with wine. Let me close with one final story, and then I'll be here, and happy to talk further about any of these things, and happy to share some samples with you as well. I'm going to jump back one more time. 1985, Gary Kasparov was 22 years old. Gary Kasparov's a name that many of you might recognize. In 1985, he becomes the world's youngest chess champion at the time. He was a chess prodigy. He's also coming of age at a time where computers are getting better. And so here he is in Germany, 1985, competing against 32 different software programs. He would beat every single one. He's playing simultaneously. So he would make a move, he would go to the next board, he'd make a move, go to the next board. He did that until he had beaten all 32 computers. Leaves this tournament 32-0. Later that year, would become the world's youngest chess champion in history at just 22 years old. Fast forward to 1996, he's in Philadelphia. Now he's playing just one computer. He's playing IBM's Deep Blue. He would hold on in 1996 to beat IBM's Deep Blue. IBM would challenge him to a rematch on the spot, offered over $1 million in prize money. Gary Kasparov gladly accepts, probably thinks, I've beat it once, I can beat it again. I'm the world's best chess player. I've been the world champion for 11 years now. This is how Newsweek described that rematch, the brain's last stand. This idea that just one more example of computers taking over if he were to lose to computers, and it probably means the death of chess, because who's going to bother to play chess when the best chess player in the world can't even beat a computer? So he would go and compete in New York City, 1997, against IBM's Deep Blue, and as I think most of you probably know, he loses to IBM's Deep Blue, becoming the first world chess champion to lose to a computer in regulation play. He was not happy about that rematch. He was not happy, probably rethought his decision for that rematch. For most of us, that's where the story ends. Gary Kasparov, the best chess player in the world, loses to a computer. Computers keep getting better and better. Here's the part of the story that most of us don't know. Coming out of this tournament, when everybody said chess is dead, computers are taking over, Gary Kasparov got involved in a new type of tournament. These were called freestyle tournaments, free play tournaments. And in these tournaments, you could enter as an individual. If you were a chess grandmaster, you could enter as yourself, rely on your own knowledge, your own intuition. If you were a software program, you could enter your software program into the tournament, and it could compete as a competitor. But you could also follow a third option. And this third option allowed you to form teams. You could take multiple people with multiple machines and enter as a single competitor in these tournaments. And what they found, and what's still true today, it's not the best chess players that are winning these tournaments, the ones relying on their own knowledge or their own intuition, but it's also not the best software programs that are winning these tournaments, the ones that are programmed to do certain moves and analyze everything in real time. It's the teams of 2 strong amateurs with 5 software programs that are winning these tournaments. And what Gary Kasparov noted about this was weak human plus machine plus better process was superior to a strong computer alone, and more remarkably superior to a strong human plus machine plus inferior process. I think this is ultimately our challenge. It isn't just to have the best technology. It isn't to go out and figure out who are the best technology vendors, let me get them. It's also no longer enough to have the best people. We have to figure out how we bring that all together. And I think the restaurants that thrive in the decade ahead will be the ones that can marry together the best technology with the best people in a new process, in a better process, and bring that process to fruition in new ways. So thank you so much for letting me join you here today.